This is the Horse Radio Network.
You're listening to The Stall and Stable Show, ideas for happy horsekeeping.
We cover a different part of the United States in this episode as I talk with Tara Tibbetts, host of the Foxhunting series on the Horse Radio Network. Tara originally hails from Montana, but has been keeping horses at home in Texas for many years. With a background in quarter horses, a serious side hustle as hunt staff, and some prowess in the show ring, Tara's horsekeeping practices are as well-rounded as her riding. This is one of those episodes where the listener gets to eavesdrop on a conversation between two friends talking horse care. So listen in for some interesting information and ideas. This is episode 90 of the Stall and Stable Show, brought to you by Lucas Equine Equipment, makers of premium quality stall components and accessories. American-made and delivered with the kind of customer service that makes them the leader in our industry, Lucas Equine Equipment is a company you can trust. From the smallest of items for your barn to full stall fronts, paddock gates, and much more. You can find it all online at lucasequine.com. Welcome back, listeners. Today is Wednesday, January 26th, 2022. I'm your host, Helena Harris. The saying goes, if you ask 10 different horse people how to do something, you'll get 10 different answers. In this series, I decided to put that adage to the test and ask 10 different horse people their opinions about what qualifies for happy horsekeeping. Those 10 people happen to be my Horse Radio Network colleagues, all horse professionals in some way, shape, or form, and all with a similar horse-first philosophy when it comes to keeping, training, and competing their horses. This week, I'm delighted to welcome Tara Tibbetts, fox hunter, Texas resident, and host of the Foxhunting series on Horses in the Morning. Well, hi, Tara, and welcome to Stall and Stable.
Hello, I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, thank you for joining me on this special HRN host series. It has been so much fun, and don't tell anybody, but you're like my favorite right now.
Oh, boy.
And that's because you are a fox hunter. That is your alter ego.
Yep.
Tell our listeners, for if they don't know or haven't listened to the Foxhunting show on Horses in the Morning, tell them what it's about.
So we are the third Thursday of every month, and we are sponsored by the Masters of Foxhounds Association, which is the governing body of fox hunting in the United States. And so we just talk about all things fox hunting. And really my goal, and we'll probably get into more of this in this conversation, but I grew up on a large ranch in Montana and shockingly mostly rode Western and moved cows and did all that stuff. And I started writing English at a young age, but I'd always loved the imagery and the idea and all of those things of writing English and fox hunting. And never in a billion years did I have any clue that it existed in the United States of America. So fast forward, I was introduced to fox hunting in 2009 or 10 and just have never looked back.
Okay. 1,001 questions just came to mind. I just want to dig into that with you. Are you a horse professional as well, or are you a serious enthusiast?
I am a very, very, very serious enthusiast.
There's a gray area with us horse people. Like we should be professional. We're so into it that we should be professionals.
Well, and my parents both grew up in horsey families, and they drilled it into my head from a very early age. Get a job and a career that you can afford to have horses, but don't make it your job.
Why do you think they didn't want you to make it your job?
Because they both were very aware of how much hard physical work it is. And not that they didn't want me to work hard physically. I don't think they wanted my livelihood to be dependent upon that.
It's a tough way to make a living, for sure.
And that definitely was before all the other, there's so many more avenues for a horse career now that didn't really exist, especially in Eastern Montana. So maybe their advice would be different now.
How did you make your way from Montana to Texas? You're in Texas now, right?
Yep, I'm in Fort Worth, Texas. I grew up showing quarter horses and competed at the Youth World Championship show, which when I was a youth was in Fort Worth, Texas. And there was a family in my hometown is about 8,000 people on the side of the state that like 10% of the population live in. So there's not a lot of people. And their parents were both from Texas, and we would go down to horse shows together in Fort Worth and stay with their grandmother. And their grandmother always said, Grandma Betsy, if anybody ever wants to move to Fort Worth, you can live with me. So I was finishing undergrad in Montana, and I loved Fort Worth. And I was like, well, I'm moving to Fort Worth. And I did.
You just packed up and went.
2 weeks after I graduated from college, I went home for a party weekend and drove to Fort Worth and have lived here ever since.
Now, was it a bit of a culture shock going from a small town in Montana to Fort Worth, Texas? Was it culture shock?
So it's kind of an interesting thing. Culturally, the communities are so different. So Fort Worth calls itself Cowtown. My hometown called itself Cowtown. And my family has a lot of history in the cattle business that ties back to Fort Worth and Texas in a lot of ways. So in that sense, it didn't feel any different. Fort Worth felt remarkably at home for me. I always felt like I fit in. Obviously, it's different in that, my hometown at 8,000 people, the closest town that was larger was 140 miles away.
Wow.
So here, obviously, Dallas-Fort Worth is one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the United States. So the volume of people is different, but I've always felt very at home here. And partially because of the horse stuff.
Well, that's kind of the universal magnet. The horses bring us together. And no matter what city we live in or town we live in, we find other horse people and we instantly feel at home. So you're in Texas now. What kind of horses do you have now? Where do you keep them? Tell us about your horse life.
My husband and I live on 10 acres. We're outside of Fort Worth, northwest of Fort Worth, and I guess you would kind of call it a suburban town. And 10 acres, I have 3 horses, 2 ponies, a donkey, 9 goats, 8 dogs, 5 cats, and 5 chickens.
You're living the dream, girl.
Yeah, it's a zoo.
Now, which of those critters talks back?
Definitely the husband. The chattiest one of all is hands down the donkey.
Is it a full-size donkey or a miniature?
Mm-hmm. He's a full-size donkey. I have no idea how old he is. We've had him for about 16 years.
What does he do? Does he have a job?
Decoration.
You're supposed to say protection.
He's not very good at it.
Okay.
I shouldn't say that. So we got him to protect baby goats, but unfortunately he kills baby goats. So
he kills baby goats? Why?
Obviously, we didn't know this before we got him, but evidently some male donkeys are aggressive towards male babies because the only ones he's ever hurt were male baby goats. And then, of course, you learn after the fact, people say, oh, well, you should only have female donkeys as protection animals because they have, I guess maybe it has something to do with the maternal.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting because I'm toying around with what third critter to add to my 2.
We had miniature donkeys for a while. We had 2 minis along with the regular size. I've never laughed so hard in my entire life. Miniature donkeys are hysterical.
Okay. Thanks for making that decision for me. All right. So you've got a menagerie. It sounds just wonderful. How long have you been in the home that you're in, the farm that you're on now?
I think 16 years. We got Pablo like 2 months after we moved in. So he's kind of our time tracker.
Okay. And do you do all the farm work yourself? Do you guys take care of the property and all the animals, or do you have help?
Yep. We do it. Just the 2 of us.
And the weather in Texas is, well, how would you describe the weather?
So, and again, I'm coming at this from growing up in eastern Montana where it would be 50 below for weeks at a time.
Yeah.
So it's cake here. It's super easy. The hardest thing about this area, like this particular year, you maybe remember the ice storm, snowpocalypse that we had in February.
Yeah. It was all over the news over here.
Yeah, it was huge. It was a big deal. And we were incredibly fortunate that we never lost power. So we're on a well. So it was wonderful and amazing. So we still had to haul a lot of water because that was a big adjustment for me. The way it was set up with my parents had all Ritchie water fountains at their place in Montana. So I'm a hardcore Ritchie fan. We don't have any at our place in Fort Worth, but all of the pipes, and you're probably familiar with this, the pipes were all below the frost line. So I had never hauled water in my life. I'd never had a frozen pipe. I'd never had any hardships dealing with cold weather before having horses in Fort Worth, ironically. And that's just because our property specifically is incredibly rocky. So it would cost a fortune to get through the rock to put the pipes low enough to be below the frost line.
Interesting. So how big is their turnout area? I mean, you've got 10 acres. Do you use all of it for the horses?
Pretty much, yes. I loved the barn that my parents had, the setup that I had as a kid. And so I kind of sort of replicated that when I built the barn that I have now. So I have a 4-stall barn, 2 stalls on either side, and then there's 2 rooms at the front. So there's a tack room and a feed room, and it's a center aisle barn. And then I've got a lovely 20-foot, like an awning porch thing off the front to help keep the shade and keep the barn cool. And the whole thing's insulated. But 3 of the stalls have a 50-foot run. So there's a run off of it. Each stall has, a sliding door so that they can be closed into the stall or they can go out into their run. And they're about, I think they're like 15 or 20 feet wide, and then they're 40 to 50 feet long. And then the 4th stall has a small paddock. So like right now, the fat kid, so the 2 ponies and the donkey, they live in that paddock. If the grass is real green, they stay there all the time. And then the 3 horses each have their own stall with a run. And it's awesome because like today, it's been raining for the last 2 days. So it's super just nasty, gross, whatever. If I don't want to let them out on the grass, I can just leave them in their stalls with runs. They can still run around in their runs. They can go out and roll. They can go poop outside. They can do all that, but they can stand in their stall and stay warm.
That's the best. It is the best as a horse owner, knowing that your horse has the space to do what they need to do mentally and physically, and you don't have to worry. Because especially when you work full time or you work off property, you're watching the weather. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm a radar map junkie.
Oh.
So like what's coming? How fast is it moving? Right? What direction is it going in? But knowing that your horses can find the shelter that they need, even rolling. My horses like to roll in a specific spot. And so as long as they have access to that, then they're mentally fine. And the overhang is a really big deal as well. I don't think any barn should be built from today forward that doesn't have an overhang because of just the flexibility it provides and shade and just keeping some even light rain off of their hay. Because, if you feed them in their stalls, they're going to go to the bathroom in their stalls and make a mess of it. Yeah. So I like to throw my hay under the overhang. Do they go out beyond these turnout areas to the rest of the property? And so you have grass.
Well, a lot of variability in the soil type. Our property's long and skinny. So up on the top of it's on a hill, and up on top of the hill is where the buildings are. And that's pretty rocky. And then they can go to the back, which I love because nobody can see them. We live on kind of a busy road, but because the property's long and skinny, nobody can see the horses when they're turned out in the back, and it's got great grass. So generally my program for my horses is they're in their stalls and their runs 12 hours a day, and they're turned out 12 hours a day. It's stupid hot here in the summertime. So in the summertime, they get turned out at night. And then when it gets to where the days are consistently 80 or cooler, then they go back to day turnout. So right now they're on day turnout.
I'm hearing that program a lot from different parts of the U.S. Just depending on the weather, people are getting more comfortable, I think, nowadays with overnight turnout, especially if the turnout area is secured with good fencing. And even if it's rocky or it's on uneven terrain, when you know it and once your horse knows the terrain, then I think we're starting to get more comfortable with that. And speaking of fencing, we're going to take a little break to tell you about tangent fencing. If you're tired of rotting, broken fences, it's time to talk to Tangent. If you want perimeter fencing that's safe and durable with a classic style, it's time to talk to Tangent. If you want to spend more time with your horses and less time worrying about your farm, it's time to talk to Tangent Materials, makers of premium HDPE lumber that looks just like wood, but without the worry. To learn more, go to stallandstable.com/fencing. Now, do you have a bug problem? What are the bugs like?
We have flies, and my husband is kind of the fly guy. He gets really into the fly maintenance program. I don't really like sprays, so we don't have any type of a fly spray system. And we've tried the predators, which we have a neighbor now who we don't love. And she had animals for a long time, and she didn't do predators. And so we just felt like it was a moot point to do the predators because her animals were producing as much or more manure than ours were. So we kind of switched up our program, and it's the worst in the spring when it's wet and it's warming up. So Kevin puts down some, it's not a poison. He puts down something that kills them if they eat it. So I guess it is kind of a poison, but it's horse safe. He always makes sure stuff is horse safe. Lots of fly spray, fly sheets. And that's the other advantage of daytime turnout. My stalls each have a ceiling fan. So they stand
Nice.
under the ceiling fan and are much happier.
Mine do the same thing, giving them the ability to make choices about
Yes.
what's most comfortable for them during the day.
Yes.
And we put fans up as well. And I'm like, it's a beautiful day, you guys. What are you doing in your stalls? And then I remember that the fans are on and they're just living the life.
Yep. I have been really happy this year. We started using the shoe fly boots, and we've been really happy with those. They make a big difference.
Do you use them on the front and the hind?
Yes.
And they don't poop in the hind? Okay.
No, I haven't had any. And I have a thoroughbred, a warm blood, and a quarter horse, and they all do fine.
Okay. A thoroughbred, a quarter horse, and a warm blood. Let's move into this part now. See, there's like, my God, this is not good for my ADD. I have so many questions for Tara. We might need to do like a part 2, Tara.
Yeah.
Let me ask a quick question though. Is your husband a horse person or is he a horse husband?
He is what I would say is the ideal horse husband. He has no interest in riding. He doesn't go to my horse shows. He doesn't go to the fox hunts. He will take care of them. He will feed them. He has built all my fencing. He's built all of our gates. He's super when my mare was pregnant, he would do the 2:00 in the morning check every night. He is so helpful with all the right things, but he's not in the way on the things that I don't want someone else weighing in on.
You should tell him to write a book, How to Be 101 Steps to the Perfect Horse Husband, a guide.
I always tell you, because we talk about that in the auditor room and stuff all the time about horse husbands. And I'm like, I'm sorry, guys, but mine's perfect.
I don't want to generalize, but I will. They like to do something. They like to be, they don't necessarily need to be horse crazed like us, but they do like to be involved and inviting them into something that it's just a team effort and it feels really good. And I think it's healthy for the relationship.
Well, and especially, and you know this as well as anybody, when you have the horses at home, you really can't do it without the support of your spouse, mostly just because of the amount of time that it takes.
Yeah. I said to my husband the other day, I'm like, I have just 2 horses and a full-time job. I'm not even a full-time mom anymore. My kid's out of the house. And yet I still am running around like a crazy person because I don't have enough time in the day. I said, I have to clean the stalls. I have to, make sure that they're alive. I have to ride them both. I have to schedule all sorts of appointments. It's amazing how many new healthcare providers there are for our horses.
Right.
Like 10 years ago, I wasn't scheduling MagnaWave or acupuncture. How did that happen? They just kind of snuck it in there. Okay, so you've got wonderful support. Let's go now to the good stuff. No, not to the good stuff yet. Your fencing.
Yes.
What kind of fencing do you have? And what do you like about it? And what don't you like about it?
So I'm excited to talk about this part because I've listened to your podcast, I think, from the very beginning, and I've never heard anybody talk about my fencing specifically. And I will say I'm 41 and I've had horses my entire life, and my parents had the same fencing that I have, and we kind of sort of copied it. So the perimeter is no climb wire fence, which is just goats can't get out. Hypothetically, dogs can't get out, which they like to prove us wrong. So that's pretty self-explanatory. But all my barn fencing is steel pipe.
Okay.
So I am in the land of oil. And so there's a lot of oil field pipe. And, you hear rotten things about pipe being dangerous, and knock on all the wood in my life. But I've never had a horse get hurt with pipe fencing. And that's a lot of why I like it. And when Kevin built it, we did, I looked at what my mom and dad had, which I loved. And then we kind of did our own research on it a little bit too. So it's big oil field pipe is kind of the frame. And then there's parts where we have a version of no climb fence so that the goats and stuff can't get out of it. But then the runs it's not quite sucker rod, but it's like a sucker rod. So it's got a little bit of bounce to it. But we did it so all of the bottom rail is far enough off the ground that a horse can't get its leg stuck through it.
Okay.
They're tall enough that they can't jump it, even if it's the craziest, most ridiculous horse ever. And so I find it's no maintenance because I don't paint it. It lasts forever. It's perfect in this climate. Wood is so hard in this climate because it's so wet and humid and hot, and it just rots stuff. And we have a termite issue here too. So
I wouldn't have thought of Texas as wet and humid.
Maybe it's my Montana self, but we average about 32 inches of rain a year in Fort Worth.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So wood's not going to be your material of choice. So the pipe is, I mean, I see it everywhere in your area. And my guess is that it's because it's available, because the material is available there. So the steel pipes but the, in between the horizontal pipes, there's space. So could a leg get through there or no?
A leg could get through because, I mean, the rods are probably 2 inches in diameter.
So
the
they're
big
thick.
pipes are like 3 or 4 inches, but the rods are a couple inches. Yes. And so, but there's enough space between there that like they can, like Simon rolls all the time and sticks his leg through the fences, but it's not catching anything.
Right. There's enough space where the leg can slide back out. Right. There's that sweet spot between this is too close, the hoof is going in and it's staying in versus it's going to go in and slide right back out. Okay. So you feel like because of that, that makes sense to me. That makes sense. And again,
it's also why we made the runs as wide as they are. So they have space because Simon's 16 too. So he's not giant, but he's not tiny. He's got plenty of space to roll and wiggle around and he's not going to end up under the fence.
How do you secure them into the ground?
So Kevin had to buy this special post hole digger because we're on rock. And so we do a post hole and put pipe into the ground and concrete the base of it down.
Okay. How far do you sink it? Do you remember?
He usually goes at least 4 feet.
Okay. That's about what you do for wood. When we were putting our fencing in, my husband was trying to tell me that we didn't need to sink the posts that deep. I was like, yeah, we do. We have in my paddock, in my barn, the special challenge, although it's not unique, is a dry lot on one side of the fence and green grass on the other. So
they push.
Right. And so the posts need to get sunk in. But the other thing too, I noticed where fence posts take a beating is horses who like to get up a run or get up a gallop in a small space and do a sliding stop into your fence. So yeah, securing those posts in there. Now also the other thing you have to look for, I would imagine, with pipe fencing is welding smooth joints. Is that something that you have to look carefully for, or do you find that most of the steel piping already comes with smooth joints?
So the pipes come solid. Kevin cuts them and he welds them. So any of the joint problems are Kevin's fault.
Okay. So under your direction.
Yes. Yeah. And he is meticulous about it. So I have all the faith in the world in his welds.
You really do have like the horse husband. Don't tell Buck. Oh, you really, damn girl.
I mean, and like my gates are works of art. Like his gates are beautiful.
Oh, this is like another thing that I could spend hours on. Tell me about what you do with your horses. You get a quarter horse, you get a warm blood, and you have a thoroughbred. And I know you hunt. Do you hunt all three of them? Tell me about your horses.
The number one, top of the food chain, my main man is my 28-year-old quarter horse. I've had him since he was an embryo. So he was born when I was 13 years old, and we owned his sire and his dam. And he took me to the World Championships in reining. I think we qualified twice. We only went once. And so when I went to college, my mom took over the ride. And at that point, he wasn't very old. When I went to college, he was like 5. Yeah, he was 5 or 6. So she did some reining, some all-around quarter horse showing, yada, yada. I moved to Texas. I was down here for a few years. Kevin and I had just gotten married, and my dad was alive at this point, and my parents were like, well, Judy's done showing Jaguar. It's time for him to move to Texas. And that was really what prompted us to buy the property where we live, is because I didn't want to board him someplace. So he moved to Texas. Fast forward a little bit of time. My dad died of actually injuries that he incurred from a wreck riding horses. He died of a blood clot. And so the last time I saw my dad alive was when he brought Jaguar to me in Texas. So kind of bittersweet. But after that happened, I bought a yearling thoroughbred, and the woman I took him to was a member of a fox hunt. I had her start him for me.
Oh,
so
okay.
At that point, Jaguar was in his late teens, I want to say. And so she was starting my thoroughbred, and I did.
Was this your first thoroughbred?
Yes, he was my first. I'd had a lot of off the track quarter horses and a lot of purebred quarter horses, but he was my first pure thoroughbred.
Okay.
And I'd started a lot of young horses, but I just didn't feel like I had the time to properly start him under saddle. So I had this person do it for me, and she did a fantastic job. But that was how I got introduced to fox hunting. And at that point, Jaguar's in his late teens. He's done everything. And I was like, well, we're going to try this out. And that was when Jaguar started his fox hunting career. And so he fox hunted until he was 24. And then he has a stifle ailment that is probably from his reining days, but that's what ultimately caused his full retirement. So
what kind of stifle ailment does he have?
The vet never diagnosed it as anything specific.
Something in there that's not right.
Yeah. And at the age that he was, I think that my veterinarian just didn't feel like it was worth digging around and doing a bunch, because he was like, this horse is 24 years old. What do you want from him?
Yeah, he doesn't owe you anything. And hunting is tough. The terrain is not great for bad knees.
Yes.
Thinking back on Jaguar's career as a field hunter and the horses that you've hunted since then, how do you feel about quarter horses as field hunters? I loved them. I thought they were extremely handy.
I've told my husband this 100 times. If we won the lottery, I would clone Jaguar.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of horses I love, including the horse I hunt currently. There's nothing like Jaguar. And he's 15 hands now. I think he shrunk a little bit. He was the perfect sweet spot of, he was big enough. He had the scope to do a 3-foot jump. And we whipped the last probably 6 years he hunted, we were whipping, and his cow sense made him a phenomenal whip horse, because he knew when the hounds were going where they shouldn't go, and he'd pin his ears back at them and bare his teeth and move them over.
Is that something typical in quarter horses? Because when Brody's concentrating, now my chestnut quarter horse Zeke, he was always an ears forward kind of guy, but Brody, when he's focusing on something, man, it's ears back and he is all business.
It's a very, very common thing with cow horses.
Okay.
And Jaguar's a grandson of Doc Barr, who was probably the first and the most famous cutting horse stallion back in the late 70s.
This is so fascinating. So now you hunt what?
A thoroughbred.
Okay. A thoroughbred.
So
very
Jaguar,
different.
Yes. Jaguar retired. My mom let me ride her quarter horse for a year. He went back to Montana. And in the meantime, I was at a Christmas party with some of my hunt friends, and my farrier was there, and my farrier plays polo, and he has good relationships with a lot of track trainers around Fort Worth in Texas. And basically, I think he just kind of occasionally gets like a truckload of thoroughbreds coming off the track. They get dropped off at his house, and the ones that are under 15-1 will go polo, and the other ones he just sells. So he had this picture of this horse on his phone, and I had to have him.
It was that scientific, was it?
And he was 2. He'd run his only 2 races that he lost miserably around Thanksgiving. And the Christmas party was in early to mid-December. A friend and I went and tried him. So it was January 2nd of the year he turned 3. And this is when I knew he was the one. So he's race fit. He's only been off the track for 60 days. He's 3 years old. It's 30 degrees. It's windy as all get out. We could barely get him to canter.
Were you nervous about getting on him, or
I was terrified.
Okay.
And my farrier got on him first, and and he really hasn't grown any taller since I bought him. He was 16.2 and lanky and whatever. And I've ridden a lot of, like I said, off the track quarter horses, never thoroughbreds. So I kind of knew what to expect brain wise, but he was just not interested in, and he wasn't lame or sick or anything like that. He's just not a super forward thinking horse unless he has to be.
So that's a whole nother episode, which I would.
Yes.
We need to, like I said, we need to book a whole series, just Helena and Tara. So you get this 3-year-old home.
Uh-huh.
And at the time you just had Jaguar?
Oh no, I had a whole slew of horses. I still had my first thoroughbred who failed miserably as a fox hunter. I showed him in the show hunter stuff for a while. We fox hunted for a season, and he got worse and worse and worse until the very last hunt of the season. He went backwards like 100 yards and kicked somebody and was like, I hate this.
Oh my God, that's so embarrassing.
Oh, it was terrible. And he was so pretty. It was so steel, beautiful gray, just lovely. He just hated it. He hated trail rides. He hated fox hunting. All that horse wanted to do was go in the ring and jump jumps. And so he is now with a kid, and that's all that they do is go around in the ring and jump jumps. So I had Sterling, I had a broodmare that I had bought, I had my mom's horse, I had Jaguar. I had too many horses, if you ask my husband. And I had my warm blood.
So who do you hunt now?
Simon. I hunt my thoroughbred.
And he's how old now?
7.
Okay.
I tootled around. I took him on trail rides. I did stuff like that. Just kind of got to know him, got to know his brain, did all those things. But I didn't want to, ride him hard until he was a little older. So he hunted his first season at the end of his 4-year-old year.
Okay. And did you keep him in the way back?
Well, I was whipping, so no.
Okay. I want to hear all about this. But before we do, let's hear from American Harvest. The story of American Harvest begins in the summer of 2016, when they established an agricultural processing facility in eastern Montana. As the market for American crops struggled during trade wars with Asia, American Harvest partnered with farmers to identify sustainable crops that could strengthen the farming economy and provide unique benefits to consumers. That's when American Harvest and their farming partners started processing high-protein crops, including hemp. Today, American Harvest makes super high-quality, broad-spectrum hemp and CBD products for both humans and horses. Their CBD oil is directly extracted from the hemp plant and includes all of its natural components, but without THC and without being subjected to any chemical processing. This truly all-natural hemp extract helps your horse maintain a supportive sense of calm, mitigating day-to-day stress, recovery from exercise-induced inflammation, and encourages healthy sleep cycles, something that's important for all mammals. If you'd like to learn more about how American Harvest equine hemp can help your horse, go to www.ahihemp.com. That's ahihemp.com. Let me back up for a minute. What do you hunt? What's the quarry? Fox, coyote?
Coyote, pretty much only coyote.
And is that a fast run, or is it, because fox is different than coyote? So what kind of mental attitude do you need? It is
fast run, but the territory that I was hunting at the time wasn't gigantic. So we as whips had to be pretty careful to make sure that the hound stayed on property.
Okay.
So as opposed to a lot of the eastern hunts, there's a couple whips who ride with the huntsman. This particular hunt tends to do more, the huntsman stays with the hounds, and then the whips kind of go around the perimeter of the property and spread out.
Got it.
And, if they get on because unfortunately, if they get on a hot run and they're going into a territory they can't go on, we have to stop them.
Yeah. That's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough. So what is the territory like? What's the footing like? Is it hilly? Is it flat? Is it rocky? Is it all of the above?
All of the above. Being from Montana, it's not like hilly, but it's definitely hilly. Some territories are really sandy. Some of them are kind of gumbo. Some of them are pretty rocky. So there's a lot of variability based on, like, generally in this area, if you're up on hills, it's rocky. If you're down in valleys, it's more of a dirt sand type mix. Further east in this DFW area, you hit some black gumbo. So pretty varied. Black gumbo.
Yeah.
It's like you put your foot into a muddy hole and you're going to have like 10 pounds of mud stuck to your foot.
And you're going to die there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so then what do you do with your warm blood?
She is a show hunter. She is Coco Chanel in every sense of those words.
I am officially envious of your horse life right there. If I could have one of each, that would be what you have in your backyard. Do you ride your horses all at home to keep them fit and trained? Do you have a ring? Where do you ride?
I have a flat area with sand and jumps.
Okay. And that's enough? That works for you?
Yes. I actually prefer to school with not having a ring barrier. I like my hunt horses to get fit on varied terrain for obvious reasons. And I've been fortunate in that I've had a couple of show hunters and they've not been prissy. So they actually tend to go a little bit better. And I like it better on varied ground. And I loved listening to Piper talk about that in your episode about the footing at horse shows and how it's not necessarily the best thing for horses, because I 100% agree with that. I think they're best. And Coco goes to a horse show and she does great, but she's barefoot.
I think Piper and I were talking about two different things. It turned out to be we were on the same page at the end, but in thinking about footing for horses, we're going to go off on this detour quickly. There's only one time that I really feel like my horses need to be shod, and that's when they're out hunting.
Yeah, I would agree.
Right. And in fact, I'll shoe all fours. So if we're not out hunting, to me, I'm like, well, my horse doesn't need shoes because she's on flat ground that doesn't have big chunky rocks in it. So to me, a flat area is fancy. That's nice footing. That's show footing. But, in everything that we talk about, I think what science is showing us today is that the more varied the terrain and even the material, even some gravelly stuff, is good for developing a hardy, healthy hoof. My quarter horses, and Brody, I don't know where Brody comes from. He's just a great horse. But they both were actually, and I don't want to say just a great horse because they're freaking phenomenal. But his feet are nice and hardy, and they're, they're not those little tiny quarter horse feet and a big quarter horse body. But I have found that even just hacking down a gravel driveway is great for them and just developing a nice, strong soul. So, but you're in that same camp. You think the more places that I can school my horses, the better them physically for their physical development.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, it's better for their body. It's better for their brain. I read tons of veterinary research, and you're seeing so much more about varied terrain being better for soft tissue. It's better for their feet. It's better for their brain. It's better for their fitness. Jaguar, his feet have deteriorated because he's not in work and because he's old as dirt, but he literally went, and I'm not exaggerating, he went 2.5 years. My farrier didn't touch his feet. He didn't even rasp his feet. And that's kind of the benefit of the rocky terrain that I live on. They go up and down this hill down the back that the hill's really rocky, and then it's nice and grassy in the back. And it, like my mini, I have a mini, a 10 hand. I don't know if he's actually a mini. He's from an auction, but I've never trimmed his feet, and I've had him for 3 years.
So they just wear down naturally.
They just wear down naturally.
But it sounds like then that your the large area for them, their turnout is large enough and varied enough where they self-exercise. Not you can put some horses out in a field and they just stand there, and that's why these track systems and paddock paradise are now starting to trend. Do your horses self-exercise, or do you have to encourage them to do that by putting their hay in one place and their water in another, things like that?
There's sometimes when, and my husband will commiserate, that I kind of would get grass is greener syndrome and look at other properties and want to be closer to town or whatever else. And I've come to the conclusion I have no interest in moving from our current property, mostly because, they're up on the hill, and the big turnout they have is about 7 acres. So it's the majority of the property. So they come out of the barn, the tank water is up on top of the hill, but the grass that's good to eat is in the far back of the property. So they go to the far back of the property. They're usually there until, depending on how hot it is, they're there until 11 to 1, somewhere in there. Then they come up to the top of the hill. They drink water. They fuss around a little bit. Then they go back to the back of the property, and then they come back when they're ready to go in. So you can't beat it.
You can't. And it is true that we sometimes suffer from the grass is always greener. We've got these dreams, especially when you see things online and social media, like, oh, that's just the perfect property. And we want all the things sometimes.
Yes.
We want all the things. And so for me, I have to back it down and say, what really do my horses need to be healthy? Some rocky terrain is one of those things. I know we're starting to get close to our time here, but I have a couple more questions for you. You mentioned the thing about the waterers, and because I live in a densely populated area of the Northeast, large tracts, large farms are not very common unless you're a gazillionaire. So putting an automatic waterer out in a field isn't something that a lot of us do, especially small property owners. So we're used to hauling water from wherever the source is to our horses' stalls. What kinds of things do you do to make sure that your horses stay hydrated, especially when it gets hot? Or do they naturally come to their tank? And, like for me, I never like to fill a tank too big because it gets full of algae and gunk, and the water even heats up. So what I find myself doing is constantly filling these tanks, the troughs, with cool, fresh water. What kinds of things do you do?
There's a lot of layers to it. So for the first 20-something, almost 30 years of my life that I had horses, I never had anything colic ever. We lost a stallion to colic, and that was the only colic I remember having. And my parents had 7 brood mares, and we had 7 foals every year. And we had a lot of horses, and stuff didn't get sick. Then I moved to Texas, and all of my horses have colicked at least one time, and it scared the bejesus out of me. And one had eaten acorns, one, and not badly. They didn't colic badly. Not like, I've been very fortunate in that, caught it early, and none of it's been like surgery requiring. But a couple of them were definitely tummy aches from not drinking enough water. So I'm paranoid. So my water program is many layered. So we have a pretty good sized trough that is, it's got a whatchamacallit on it so that it fills on its own. I can't remember, a levelly thingy.
Yep.
That is community water. The horses drink there. The goats drink there. Quite frankly, the cats and dogs drink there. One of the dogs likes to get in it. We dump it regularly. There's things we do to try to control bugs. They each have 2 buckets or 3 buckets of water in their stalls during the summertime. I put salt on their feed to encourage drinking. If I'm riding, I trail ride quite a bit in the summertime when it's really hot. They get paste electrolytes. And then the other thing I've started doing, and this was because Jaguar colicked pretty violently in January of this year, and we really thought we were going to lose him. And my veterinarian's there, and we're talking things through, and she's very honest with me. And usually a horse of that age with as violent of a colic as he was having, I think she was pretty convinced it was a lipoma. So she had done the rectal exam, and she hit something, and that's kind of why she thought that. Well, long story short, he just can't eat hay anymore. So he had a pretty serious impaction. He was at the clinic for 3 days, but he was rip-roaring ready to eat. She said every day they'd drive up and they'd hear him in the barn screaming because he wanted more food.
Aww.
And really, even before that had happened, I had started, all of my horses get soaked beet pulp with alfalfa every day. And Jaguar gets everything. Like he can't eat regular hay. He was getting soaked regular hay for 2 or 3 years before that happened, but now he can't have any hay. So he gets soaked beet pulp, soaked alfalfa cubes 3 times a day. He gets a senior that's soaked in water twice a day. And then the other horses, the ponies and the donkey, don't get soaked alfalfa cubes, but the thoroughbred and the warm blood both get soaked alfalfa cubes with beet pulp in it.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I also started to soak everything when my thoroughbred colicked. And as long as I've owned horses, I hadn't experienced it. I've experienced it with other horses where I've worked and in other barns. Right. So she was the first that really had a big issue. And so I said, it's really not that big of a deal to soak this stuff. For me, in the colder months, I like to have warm water. And I know not everybody has access to warm water in their barns, but a tea kettle, an electric tea kettle, can do the job. But it's really not that difficult. And the insurance that it provides you, when you think about what a horse naturally eats, right? Grass or forage that has moisture in it, has water in it.
Exactly.
And we take them out of that. Even if they do graze on pasture, it's still not enough moisture in their body, hydration, because of the kind of work that we're doing and the stress that we put their bodies under. The last thing I'm going to ask you about is safety and fire prevention or emergency preparation. I know in California, they're experiencing wildfires. We have hurricanes in the southeast. We've got blizzards in the northeast. What kinds of things do you have to really get you nervous that you need to prepare for? And then how do you prepare for those things?
So the main risk we have, similar to Jamie, is tornadoes. And the kind of good, kind of not good thing, there's really nothing you can do to prepare for a tornado because it's going to get you, it's going to get you, it's not. There's the argument of, do you turn them out or you put them in? And I kind of let the horses tell me. Usually they want to come in the barn when there's a storm that has tornado risk. My barn is kind of similar to my fencing. The barn is framed in metal. It's a metal sided building. It's fully insulated, roof, walls, everything is insulated. The inside of the stalls is lined with 2x12s. So it's wood inside of the stalls. So it's a pretty solid building. And the frame of the building is in concrete that they dug into the ground a little bit. So it's not a tornado proof barn by any shake of the stick, but it can withstand some pretty significant winds. And Jaguar's always kind of he's my canary, I guess you would say, the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
If he's out in a storm, and it can be kind of funny, especially during like snowstorms, which obviously is not like a safety issue, but he'll be back in the back of the pasture covered in snow and Coco shivering, and the donkey looks like an icicle, and they're all just standing there miserable. And Jaguar's like, it's fine, just stay out here. But if Jaguar gets cold and he comes to the barn, everybody gets put in the barn. And it's kind of the same way with the storms. He kind of tells me, I don't know what I'm going to do when I don't have him anymore.
He's lived enough years on this planet to have the experience to make those decisions. Now, who's the herd leader?
Honestly, I absolutely have no idea. It's Simon or Coco. It was Jaguar for a long time, but because he physically can't boss the other ones around, he's kind of fallen down in the pecking order, which they're not mean to him by any shake of the stick. You can tell that they respect him. But the cute thing is, and we haven't talked about this, and I apologize if I take us on a new rant, but I have a yearling Chincoteague pony.
Where did you get one of those?
I bought him in the auction last year. My friend
Did you
and I
go
bought
there?
him. No, because they did it online.
Oh, huh.
So he's a solid chestnut, which, as you know, everybody wants the paints that look like Stormy, but
Yeah.
he was cheap in the sale because he's a solid color. He reminds me more of Jaguar than any other horse I've ever had, and they are besties. They play together in the
Interesting.
pasture. They come up together. They go out together. And it's funny because it's kind of elevated Jaguar in the pecking order a little bit because now the little rambunctious, annoying kid is his buddy.
Yeah.
And so the pecking order changes pretty regularly just because Jaguar was always the boss. Coco kind of is when she's in heat, but Coco and Simon kind of just do their own thing. So
Well, I'm just thinking about Jaguar's wisdom and being around for as long as he has and experiencing all that he has. I was wondering if the other horses would look to him in those times of unsettled weather.
And they do.
What's the old guy
Yes.
doing? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So he doesn't necessarily need to be physically at the top of the totem pole, but what he knows is certainly respected by his herd mates.
Yes. And he hears me call and he comes, doesn't matter where he is, he makes his way to right exactly where I'm standing. And the rest of them will be like, huh, what are we doing? Why are we going here? Okay. But it's great. It's easy. It makes everything so much easier to teach.
I know. Gosh, would you come back? Can we do another episode?
Yeah.
I'll come up with some topic that'll be a good excuse because we have so much uncovered stuff to talk about.
Yes. Well, and I think I think about this a lot when I listen to your podcast, just that, and I am by no means know-it-all. Like I'm constantly learning, doing, trying, but I have such a unique situation and opportunity that I get it all the time from other horse people. Like, oh, I love, your setup is so fantastic. And I do, I love it. It's heaven.
Well, send me pictures because
I will.
we can. This is one of the things that I like is, and especially in different parts of the U.S. because we have to use different materials and our terrain is different, our climate is different. So how we adapt our farms, not only for, our area where we live, but also for our lifestyle. So if you can send me pictures, then we can really hone in on different details because those details are important. They can be the difference between a sick horse and a well horse, a safe horse and an unsafe horse, and a good time and a not so good time. So I would love to do this again with you.
I would love it.
Tara, tell people one more time where they can find you online and when they can listen to the Foxhunting episode on Horse Radio Network.
So we're third Thursday of the month is the Foxhunting episode. And the goal of that episode is to familiarize unfamiliar people with fox hunting to realize how approachable it is. Because my favorite thing about fox hunting, and I'm sure you will agree, when you're in the hunt field, you're riding with show hunters, eventers, polo players, trail riders, fox hunters only. It's such a mashup of different riding style people, and that's my favorite thing about it. So everyone should try it. The best place to find me on social media is my Instagram. It's at TN Tibbetts, Tibbetts. I post all kinds of fox hunting and dogs, and I foster dogs, and I have cats and zoo and traveling and all that kind of stuff.
Great. And we will post links to those places at stallandstable.com. If you go to this episode's show notes, you can hot link right over to all things Tara. Tara Tibbetts, thank you so, so much.
It was a pleasure. I hope to come back again.
Well, it was really nice to hear from someone in a different part of the United States for a change. We do a lot of coverage on the Eastern Seaboard. There are several horsey hubs, many horsey hubs here, but obviously Texas is very horsey. And, the entire United States is horsey. So we're going to try to cover more diverse areas in the future. So anyway, it was pretty cool to hear from Tara and how they do things just a little bit differently there than we do here in the Northeast. As always, you can go to stallandstable.com for show notes, which will provide links and more information. And remember, no matter where you are, if you need some advice setting up your barn or your business, go to stallandstable.com and click on the Schedule an Appointment button. You get an hour of my time where we can talk about anything you'd like, from advice getting started with a business plan, business modeling, or if you're a private farm owner and you're either looking for a new property or you've got a brand new barn, let me know. I can help you get things set up right. Thanks once again for joining me, listeners. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. And that's a wrap for this one. I hope you enjoyed it.